Ladies and gentlemen, Minnesota is on fire tonight because what started as a small voter fraud story has now erupted into a full-blown federal investigation. I'm talking about the Department of Justice under President Donald J. Trump has officially stepped in, and they're not just looking at a couple of bad actors today. No, they're actually chasing a state-funded voter registration network accused of funneling your taxpayer dollars into fake registrations across 13 counties. Oh, and get this, the same officials who told us, oh, the system worked, they're now facing subpoenas, federal lawsuits, and criminal charges. A Minnesota election judge has just been indicted right alongside with Letitia James. The Secretary of State is now under oath, and federal agents are demanding every hidden voter record that they can get their hands on. Folks, this is the moment that everything breaks wide open, because if what the feds just uncovered is really true, this isn't just about one state. Oh no, this is about how deep the money, the politics, and the fraud have been tied together for years. So stay right there, because today I want to go ahead and pull back the curtain on how a state-funded foundation, fake voter registrations, and a panicked Secretary of State have just collided head-on with President Trump's Justice Department. Hit the like button, subscribe. Okay, this is breaking news, guys. Feds expose Minnesota's voter fraud network. But buckle up, because by the end of this video, you're going to see exactly why Minnesota just became ground zero for the fight over America's election. Okay, so tonight, the federal hammer just dropped on Minnesota. President Donald Trump's Department of Justice has filed suit against Secretary of State Steve Simon, demanding full access to every voter registration record that the state has withheld. Now, for months, watchdogs and conservative lawmakers flagged suspicious spikes in registrations across multiple counties, including duplicate names and implausible address clusters. So now prosecutors, they want the raw files, not the polished summaries. They allege stonewalled requests, inconsistent logs, and manipulation of list maintenance procedures that should have purged ineligible entries. Now, Simon insists that the system is secure, but yet for some reason his office is lawyering up while resisting disclosure deadlines. The suit is framing this as a transparency case with national stakes. Now, if Minnesota's books are really clean, go ahead and show them. Like, what are you hiding? If not, voters deserve the truth before the 2026 elections, right? Drop a 2026 midterms down below if you agree that they need to show us the truth if they have nothing to hide, right? This is not a routine audit, guys. This is a federal confrontation, and Minnesota just got moved from nothing to see here, folks, to ground zero. So this all traces all the way back to the summer case that quietly blew open. And we covered this a while ago. Some of my longtime subscribers might remember this. Okay, 2 contractors pleading guilty after submitting between 500 and 600 fraudulent voter registration applications across 13 Minnesota counties. Now, these were not volunteers. They were paid by an unnamed foundation that, according to legislators, received roughly 99% of its budget from state grants, effectively taxpayer-funded fraud. Now, the scam unraveled because small town clerks, they noticed these mismatched names, vacant lot addresses, and photocopied signatures, clearly some fakes, or at least hints that they might be fakes. The FBI and the state investigators had been digging for like 2 years, yet only the 2 lowest rungs were charged. And then they left the state. Meanwhile, the foundation kept operating projects, raising questions about oversight, monitoring, and who signed those checks. Now, if 2 contractors could seed hundreds of fake registrations while under investigation, how many others slipped through the broader network? Now, that unanswered question, that lit the fuse. This is why the feds are here demanding the originals county by county. Now, confusion is expensive, and Medicare is one of the most confusing systems out there. You already know. For seniors who are watching the show right now, I already know what you're dealing with. Nonstop robocalls, texts, junk mail about Medicare during annual enrollment period. I mean, it's overwhelming, right? And honestly, it kind of makes you want to just tune it all out and just stick with your current plan. I totally get it, right? I really do. But the risk is, if you don't review your options today, your costs could go up tomorrow. You could lose out on coverage, or even your plan could disappear entirely. This is why I partner with Chapter. They're the only advisors who look through and review every plan nationwide, and they recommend what actually fits your needs. Now, on average, they've actually saved seniors $1,100 per year. Now, the call is really quick. Chapter can review your options in under 20 minutes. And one of our viewers, she said, I finally understood my Medicare plan after Chapter explained it to me. So let me ask, do you want to stay confused, or do you want to join the majority who are already finding clarity? Now, most people, they're dialing that phone number right there at the bottom of your screen, or they're visiting askchapter.org/Ron. That phone number again is 909-563-8279. Now, when grilled before the Minnesota Legislature Committee earlier this month, Secretary of State Steve Simon He doubled down. So Steve Simon, he told lawmakers, quote, "The system worked." Now, according to Simon, no fraudulent votes were cast. Only applications stopped before reaching the ballot box. But that defense didn't really sit well with Republicans on the committee. Republicans who pointed out that taxpayer money was used to fund the same organization that was responsible for the fake registrations. Now, under oath, Simon claimed every irregularity was caught, yet failed to explain how his office kept approving grants for the very group that's now under federal scrutiny. His tone was confident, almost rehearsed, but the optics were brutal. A Secretary of State insisting that there's nothing to see while federal subpoenas are piling up. Now, as one senator asked bluntly, if the system really worked, Mr. Simon, then why are the feds still knocking on your door? Now, the biggest red flag inside the federal complaint isn't just what Minnesota admitted. It was actually what they left out. Now, state officials confirmed fraudulent activity across 13 counties, yet publicly named only one of them. So 12 others remain sealed, unmentioned, and unexamined. The Department of Justice under President Trump wants every county file opened, suspecting selective disclosure and political protection. Sources say that the unreleased data may reveal deeper coordination between local offices and the state-funded foundation. Now remember, the 2026 midterms are less than a year away, guys, and those same counties could decide congressional margins. Critics are arguing that the concealment, it is deliberate. It is a firewall that's protecting allies before campaign season kicks off in full force. So if the records are clean, transparency should be very simple, right? But instead, officials they're invoking confidentiality clauses and refusing access and heightened suspicion. So Drapo, what are you hiding down below if you think that they're hiding something? You know what I'm saying, guys? The feds call it willful obstruction. Minnesotans are calling it something simpler, just a cover up in plain sight. And just when Minnesotans thought it couldn't get any worse, it did. A longtime election judge from Hennepin County was indicted just last week for approving ballots from voters who were never properly registered. Now, prosecutors allege that she ignored verification protocols during both early voting and absentee processing. Her defense? Administrative confusion. But the federal indictment paints something far darker, a willful disregard for state law. So while Democrats call it an isolated case, federal officials are seeing a pattern here, a system that's too loose, too politicized, and now collapsing under scrutiny. In fact, the charged judge reportedly worked with multiple civic outreach groups, some funded by the same grant programs that are now under investigation. Now, Washington prosecutors now view this as part of the same ecosystem, state-funded operations feeding compromised voter rolls. Now, the symbolism is impossible to ignore at this point. You got a judge trusted to protect election integrity, now standing accused of helping to destroy it. So the deeper these investigations dig, the more one name keeps surfacing: the mysterious nonprofit foundation that's behind last summer's fake registrations. Financial records are now showing this group continued receiving state contracts in both 2024 and in 2025, even after its workers pleaded guilty in federal court. Nearly $1.2 million in new grants were approved through their Secretary of State's office, allegedly for voter outreach initiatives. Yet, no one seems to know what the money funded. Lawmakers now suspect that it wasn't oversight, it was complicity. A legislative audit revealed signatures from senior election administrators on renewal forms post-indictment. That right there, guys, that revelation has sparked questions of who signed off, who benefited, and whether the funds were used to quietly rebuild the same network that the FBI just dismantled. Now, federal attorneys are now tracking the money trail, and from what's emerging, it appears every dollar may lead straight back to Steve Simon's desk. Now, meanwhile, you got Governor Tim Walz. He decided to go ahead and throw gasoline on the whole fire. So back in May, he signed the driver's license for all bill, allowing anybody in Minnesota, regardless of immigration status, to obtain a driver's license. Now, on paper, it sounds harmless, right? But here's the catch. Minnesota also uses automatic voter registration through the DMV. So that means when someone applies for a driver's license, their information is automatically uploaded to the voter system unless they decide to opt out. Now, critics are now asking the obvious question: how many non-citizens were added to those rolls without even realizing it? Federal election monitors under President Trump's DOJ are now reviewing whether the state violated national voter ID standards. Democrats call it inclusivity. Republicans are calling it insanity. Either way, it's opened a brand new vulnerability, and it's happening in the very same state now under federal investigation for voter registration fraud. Now, this scandal has become the newest battlefield between President Trump's Department of Justice and Minnesota's Democratic establishment. In fact, the White House calls it a necessary cleanup operation. Minnesota Democrats call it federal overreach, but the tension is explosive. Federal attorneys argue that they're simply enforcing election law that the state state ignored. But Simon's office insists that Minnesota runs one of the most secure systems in America. But if that's really true, then why the sealed counties? Why the gag orders? Why the panic over subpoenas? I mean, inside sources are already saying that the Justice Department is preparing to expand its scope, potentially auditing state-issued grants across several election cycles. Now, Trump allies in Congress, they're celebrating it as proof that the adults are back in charge. Meanwhile, Minnesota officials are circling the wagons, refusing to release records and accusing the feds of politics. Washington wants receipts, Minnesota wants silence, and America just wants the truth. Drop the truth down below, guys. Now, to understand how deep this goes, you really got to look back to 2020. So when Project Veritas dropped undercover footage alleging ballot harvesting linked to Ilhan Omar's campaign in Minneapolis, at the time, Democrats and the media called it disinformation. We heard that, right? Yet now, with federal prosecutors confirming fake registrations funded by the state, that old story doesn't look so crazy anymore. You see, back then, community activists were filmed bragging about stacks of absentee ballots, promising votes for cash. Investigations went nowhere, no arrests, no accountability, but history's echo is deafening. Same city, same network, same silence. And here we are, guys. 5 years later, we're watching it happen all over again. Only this time, the feds are involved. And the paper trail leads straight into taxpayer funding. Now, the question practically asks itself, how many times can Minnesota say isolated incident before it stops being isolated? Drop an Ilhan Omar if you believe she was really involved in this from the very beginning. Now, you would think that a story involving fake voter registrations, a federally funded nonprofit, and an indicted election judge would dominate headlines, right? But no, major news outlets like CNN and MSNBC, they've said nothing, not a word. Instead, it's independent media, channels like the Ron Yates channel, and local journalists that are doing the heavy lifting, connecting the dots between public contracts, missing records, and federal subpoenas. Meanwhile, social media is on fire. Hashtags like Minnesota fraud, hashtag voter files now, and hashtag show us the 13 counties are trending on X. Minnesotans are furious. They're flooding town halls and they're demanding answers from their very representatives that they were supposed to be representing them, right? Even some moderate Democrats are quietly distancing themselves from Simon's office. The silence of the national press isn't calming things down. In fact, it's amplifying the suspicion. When people realize the story they're not being told is the one that threatens their democracy, that's when outrage tends to turn into action. And this is exactly what we're watching unfold right now. So tonight, it's no longer about just Minnesota. President Trump's Department of Justice has officially expanded its investigation, launching a multi-state review of election security funding. Minnesota is now labeled ground zero after auditors traced taxpayer money that was funneled into the same foundation that fueled the fake registrations. Folks, sources inside the DOJ, they're hinting at sealed subpoenas that are targeting additional state agencies, possibly even the departments that tie to federal grant distribution. Now, rumors are swirling around about pending FBI record seizures, and congressional oversight committees are requesting closed-door briefings. Federal investigators are following the money trail. They're reviewing audit logs and payment vouchers and emails that could expose coordination between public officials and private organizations. What began as a local voter fraud story has now become a national integrity test. Insiders whisper that the next round of subpoenas could reach the top, and Minnesota might just be the next domino to fall. Now, the political earthquake in Minnesota, it's already reshaping the landscape. Calls are mounting for Secretary of State Steve Simon to resign. Meanwhile, Governor Tim Walz publicly defends him, framing the controversy as politically motivated theater. The divide couldn't be any clearer. Republicans are demanding emergency audits, new voter ID mandates, and independent review of every grant issued to the foundation. Democrats accuse the Trump administration of weaponizing oversight. Inside the Capitol, legislative hearings have widened beyond voter registrations to include campaign finance irregularities and potential misuse of federal funds. Even longtime Democrats privately admit the optics are dangerous. The more Simon resists, the worse it looks. GOP challengers are already fundraising off the chaos, calling this the Watergate of Minnesota. And through it all, one truth is impossible to ignore. The walls are closing in, and Minnesotans are watching it happen in real time. So what's happening in Minnesota isn't staying in Minnesota. With the 2026 midterms less than a year away, this case has become a national flashpoint for election integrity. In fact, President Donald J. Trump, he has vowed to restore honest elections one state at a time, and his administration now cites Minnesota as the textbook example of what happens when accountability disappears. Analysts predict that this investigation could spark sweeping new federal rules across all 50 states, stricter ID requirements, funding freezes for non-compliant states, and mandatory audit trails for every registration grant. Supporters call it long overdue. Critics say it's political revenge. But one thing's very clear. Americans are watching today. The outcome here could define how future elections are run and whether public confidence ever returns. Because this isn't just about one scandal. It's about trust itself. And right now, that trust is hanging by a thread over the state of Minnesota. So here we are, folks. Months of denial, a summer of scandals, and now a federal showdown that's exposing exactly what Minnesota tried to hide. A taxpayer-funded foundation caught funding fake voter registrations. A Secretary of State caught stonewalling federal subpoenas. A governor defending the indefensible. But the walls of secrecy are cracking. Trump's DOJ has kicked the door wide open, and for the first time, the people are seeing the truth for themselves. What started as whispers of clerical errors has erupted into a full-scale reckoning. They thought that they could just bury this in bureaucracy, but they underestimated the one force that they can't silence, the American public. So share this story, comment down below, and tell me what you think, guys, because tonight the cover-up is finally unraveling and the light is shining straight through Minnesota. Like, subscribe, I'll see you next time. Hey, by the way, guys, if you're one of the real ones who really enjoy what we do here on the channel, you've got to check out the Inner Circle. This is where our true supporters get exclusive access to content that I just can't share here, completely commercial free. It's also the best way to keep this channel going strong. So if you want to be a part of something special, join us over there. Links in the description or in the pinned comment down below.